Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our town hall. Today, we are talking about mental health for men of color. I am your moderator. My name is Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. We have an all-star team of panelists for you. It is going to be an incredible session. I will get started by introducing all of them to you right now. But first off, our prayers are with Abraham Scully. Abraham was scheduled to be one of our panelists today. Unfortunately, he's living in Pensacola, Florida right now. So he's currently dealing with major flooding and power loss all across the region. So please send your prayers and your positive thoughts to Abraham so that he and the entire Pensacola community fully recovers from this natural disaster. And then hopefully he's going to join us on a future program. So please send all of your prayers and good thoughts. Certainly the people of Pensacola need that right now. But we do have some incredible panelists here today, so I feel really good about where we're going here today. Our first panelist is Edson O'Neale. If you meet Edson in person, you would think that, just looking at him, he's a very strong, confident person. But what you might not know is some of the demons that he fights all the time when it comes to things like self-worth. Edson constantly questions his self-value and what he means to this world. From the questioning, he's previously gone through depression, thoughts of suicide, and also a lack of self-confidence. There were actually times where Edson thought this world would be better off without him, but because of the people that he surrounds himself with and the will not to give up, he was able to push through. This will comes from his background and culture growing up in the beautiful island of St. Croix, the U.S. Virgin Islands. His Trinidadian parents instilled a pride to always remember where you come from and who you are. That belief is what always keeps Edson going and giving back to his community. During his 6.5 years at St. Leo University, he started off as the assistant director of student activities. Then he got promoted to director of student activities. Edson had the privilege of serving in many roles, advising student government, the campus activity boards, student organizations, and of course, fraternity and sorority life. Now he speaks for Greek University on campuses all across the country. Scott Marsden is originally from New Jersey, but he moved to Florida at an early age. He graduated from Citrus High School in Inverness, Florida. Then he attended St. Leo University, where he obtained a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. While at St. Leo, he pledged and joined the Untitled Chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha, along with Edson O'Neale. He's married to his wife, Tanisha, and they have a daughter and a child on the way. So congratulations to Scott. He's been working for the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office for 7 years as a patrol deputy and field training deputy who was trained in crisis intervention training. And last but certainly not least, the road to recovery began for Greg Vogt during his time at a mental health center as a teenager, where he had been sent when his mental health became life-threatening. There, Greg discovered the power of vulnerability, the importance of real relationships, and the act of admitting faults. While in the treatment center, he realized the opportunity he had to pursue a path of mental wellness. Greg graduated from the University of Arizona in 2017 with a bachelor's degree in marketing and entrepreneurship too. During his time as a student, Greg spent nearly 2.5 years writing and publishing a book. His self-help memoir, The Battle Against Yourself, was written with the mission to help students who are struggling to find hope, identity, and fulfillment. Since publishing his story, Greg's mission to help has expanded to college campuses and other groups across the country. In his engaging talks with Active Minds and also Greek University, Greg drives home the importance of prioritizing our mental health, seeking support, and supporting those around us to do the same, and the power of sharing our experiences. So welcome to all of our panelists. Welcome to all of our guests that are joining us live. We really appreciate you joining us for this really important conversation. So thank you so much for participating. Now, Edson, I'd like to start with you with some questions. Of course, if anybody in our audience has any questions, feel free to throw that in the chat and we will get that to all of our panelists here today. But Edson, let's start with this. Why are Black men taught at a young age to not show their feelings? Why is it hard for men of color to talk about mental health?
Hey, Mike, thanks for the question, and I want to thank everyone for coming out to the event this evening. So the reason why we are taught at a young age to not show our feelings. And you're going to hear this a lot amongst pretty much the program, but the one word that can summarize it is weakness. We simply don't want to be viewed as being weak. We don't want to be viewed as being not that person they can rely on and that they can depend on. And plus, with, you know, the rising racism that's been going on lately, we definitely don't want to be shown as weak so that we can be taken advantage of and they think that we're not worth it or we can't really make amends on what we have to do. So the reason why we're taught at a young age to really not show emotion is because we're taught not to show weakness, you know, always be strong, you know, be a man, man up, you know, always making sure that you're handling your business. Because if you show a form of weakness, they're going to look down on you and then they're going to take advantage of you. So that's what we're taught at a young age, to always stay strong and not showing emotion because we don't want to be viewed as weakness. And that always comes with misconceptions about how we are viewed as Black men because, you know, we're viewed that we don't have feelings or we're not open to it or we can't share. But when there's occasions when we do try to share our feelings, we're not either taken seriously, you know, we're laughed at, or, you know, we're not viewed in the same light as other people. So then when we do try to open up and share our feelings, we're not taken seriously. So you want us to open up more, but when we do, it's kind of like, well, you don't take me seriously. So we kind of go through that struggle of, you know, should we open up because will they take me seriously or will they take it, you know, to a point to where they understand where I'm coming from, or are they just gonna laugh at me and not take me seriously or just take advantage of me or not even care? So I think as men of color, we struggle with that because we're taught to not open up. But then when there's occasions when we do try to, then we're not taken seriously. So we struggle with that. I know for me, as far as, you know, that openness and, you know, trying to be strong and be a man and be this, but then when I try to, I'm not taken seriously. So, you know, we kind of have that struggle of, you know, should we or should we not? Because if we should, you know, we're not taking it seriously. But if we don't, you know, we're viewed as, oh, we don't have feelings and we're not opening up enough. So that's kind of things that we kind of go to as men of color. I mean, I think men as a whole deal with that, but as a man of color, I think we deal with it a little bit more in common because of how we're taught and, you know, always taught to be strong and hold ourselves together and, you know, always want to be shown as being successful and, you know, to hold everything in. You know, so that's why, you know, we're taught at a young age to do that so that we can always be strong. But then when we try to show a little bit of emotion, then we are viewed as being weak. So it's like, why should we?
Scott, I was curious in the intro, of course, we talked about you being a police officer in your professional life. So for us, it was really important to understand what is your biggest challenge in being a police officer in our current climate here in the United States? What strategies do you personally put in place to deal with some of these challenges in a healthy way?
What did I cut out at?
You cut out by the police department and Mike Brown, and you're on mute again. There you go.
There you go.
There it is. I don't know why it keeps muting, but no. One of the things when I joined was the shooting of Mike Brown, and it's been tough because when you go home, you know, you expect to take off the hat and the belt and get away from it. But with everything going on recently, it's kind of everywhere where you go. You know, police officers have a bad name, and right now we're not looked upon too highly, you know, from society a lot in general. You see it over social media, the media in general, even entertainment, movies. And even with, you know, recent extreme polarization of politics, I mean, you know, either you're on one side or the other. It's not, there's almost no middle ground. I mean, especially at work, everyone is an expert. The mentality where, you know, you have people that because you're a police officer, maybe not a trained psychologist, that you have no opinion or no expertise on mental health or on because you're not a lawyer, you don't really truly understand the law. And it's been difficult, but part of it is just finding a common ground and trying to build a rapport with the citizens that you interact with, and taking one call at a time, and dealing with people as humanly as possible. And when I say that, humanizing yourself and showing them that at the end of the day that you are a person, and that you're not here to try and ruin their day, you're not trying to ruin their life, but you're here to do your job. And unfortunately, a lot of times people see us on, sometimes it can be the worst day of their lives. So having one of the most important parts is having empathy. So it's been very stressful, but it's fulfilling when you can actually help a person out.
Yeah, gosh, we all need empathy right now. So important. Greg, talk to us a little bit about this stigma that's out there. Do you feel that there is a stigma that men just don't get depressed?
Yes and no, to be honest. I guess the no part would be, I don't think there's a stigma anymore where that it's just like a blanket statement that men don't get depressed. I think we've come to the realization as a culture that, you know what, depression, mental health challenges, anxiety, they can hit anybody. It does not discriminate. Young or old, no matter your profession, no matter where you live, depression really can pour into anybody's life. Where I think the stigma does still potentially lie, especially among men and experiencing depression, is how we respond. You should respond by doing X, Y, and Z. And that kind of goes into a little bit about what Ed was alluding to in just sort of like the signs of weakness and the signs of, should we be vulnerable, should we not, and whatnot. Almost like, okay, I have empathy if you are, sort of in the rut for a little bit, but why are you so depressed for that long? Or why is it that bad? Or can't you just snap out of it and like go back to being, a good employee, a good father, a good whatever it is? And so I think the stigma is more so on the response and the action of the depression rather than the actual depression itself. I feel like as a society, we've turned the corner in recent years in understanding a better scope on mental health and how it truly does impact a wide realm of people.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Scott, I was curious, how does racism affect people of color, and how does depression play a role with all of this?
Racism is still a huge issue in our country. The way I explain it to a lot of people was that, the Civil Rights Act was signed, I believe, in 1964. And to put that into perspective, my parents were teenagers at that time. So, something is going from people of color not being treated as equal human beings, and probably some people not even thinking them as human beings, to changing things over in such a short period of time. It's difficult. Things change over generations, and mental health for people of color is often not taken seriously. And like Edson said, as far as when a person, they grow up and they hear, be tough, man up, you showing emotions or you cry, some in some cultures that's frowned upon, or that, you're disciplined for that. And it kind of builds a stigma that, you always have to be hard, you have to be macho, the machismo, always showing, being tough. And it can weigh down on you when you are going through something and you feel like you need to express yourself, and not allowing yourself to reach out for help.
Edson, I'm curious, from your perspective, why are men of color scared to cry and show emotion?
Great question, Mike. So from my perspective and experiences, and from talking to other men of color, the reason why we're so scared to cry is because of that showing emotion and that response that we're going to get. We don't know what response that we're going to get. So are they going to comfort us or ask us how we're doing, or ask us, how's everything going, what's wrong? Or are we going to be laughed at? Are we going to be told, man up? Real men don't cry.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the type of things that we are told, at a very young age. So when it comes to a point where we potentially might cry, I think some of those times kind of comes back, like Scott said, the stigma that, oh, if I cry, you know, I'm going to be told to man up. I'm going to be told to, I got to be strong. You know, I can't do this, you know. So these are some of the reasons why we're kind of scared to, or we're scared to cry, because just a whole emotional thing and that kind of stigma of hearing, you know, that, oh, man up, oh, you know, be a man, you know, real men don't cry. So you kind of hear it on your head. So when you hear it on your head, it kind of gives you the perspective of, well, I can't cry because I have to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, sometimes when, again, with the unknown of response that we're going to get, are we going to be taken seriously? Are we going to be asked how we're doing? Because some Black men, when they're going through different situations, you know, we're told like, you'll be okay, you'll get through it, instead of asking questions like, so how did I make you feel? How are you feeling? Are you okay? What do you need assistance with? Like, things will get better, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. Like, those are some of the things we don't hear too much of. So because we don't hear it a lot, you know, and we're mostly hearing that, oh, you're good, it'll be okay, man up, be a man. You know, so because we constantly hear these things, that's what we're kind of used to. So it's just like, okay, well, if I cry, they're going to say this, so I might as well just kind of hold it in and just kind of cry alone, or not cry at all, because, you know, I'm just not going to be hurt. So there's this tendency that we won't be heard. So it's like, why speak up? Why cry? Why show emotions when we won't be heard? So that's why Black men are scared to cry. Black men are scared to show emotion, is because we feel that we won't be heard, or we won't be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm. I have another question for Scott, because I'm really curious the differences in police officers between Black police officers and white police officers right now in our current climate. So Scott, talk to us a little bit about some of the mental health challenges that you see within Black police officers. And then I'm wondering, what are the mental health challenges that you see in white police officers? Is there a difference at all? And what support might be needed for these officers?
In general, mental health is a big issue for the law enforcement community. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but it's, you know, suicide rates are very high amongst police officers. Alcoholism, stress-induced illnesses are very high amongst, you know, our profession. You know, it's sad sometimes you see these guys, they're retired for a few months and they drop down dead. As far as for Black police officers, especially recently, it's that who are you with, who, you know, choosing sides, you know, to say that you can't, I can't be Black and that I can't be a police officer, you know, when obviously I'm both. It's going to some of these, you know, protests and being called Uncle Toms or sellouts or race traders. And, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, we're Black before we're police officers. So the issues that plague, you know, the Black community in this country and everywhere else in the world plague us just as much. But also we're police officers, and you know, we see things from a different perspective. And we know that not all police are bad, and it's a very small minority of people that are causing a large portion of the problem. As far as police officers should be more willing to accept mental health help. Just like the Black community, it's almost a similar issue where, you know, we're supposed to be tough. You know, we have guns, we have tasers, and, you know, we put people in jail. But it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to ask for help. Mm-hmm. Also, a lot of police officers are scared that if they do ask for help, that, you know, they'll be ostracized by their supervisors or you know, or their peers even. With my department, you know, there's various outlets where you can seek out, you know, counseling and help, and actually, you know, we have peer support groups and other opportunities to where if you are having an issue mentally, you can reach out to a peer or a person that's a part of another program that can help you out.
Yeah, that perspective is really important. I appreciate you sharing that with us because it's something that I've been thinking about as everything has been unfolding over the past few months here, specifically in the media. And, you know, Scott brings up a good point too, that we do have options that officers and other professionals are being given some outlets to help with mental health. So, Greg, I'm wondering, do you think that we're in a time right now where men are more open to share their feelings than ever before?
It's circumstantial. Let's just take this example for what we're doing right now. I mean, I think this is a brilliant testimony as an example to create a space, to create an opportunity, to create a platform for people to open up, for people to be real, for men to gather. And these type of things are happening more widespread across the country, right? Whether it's Zoom, online gatherings, in person, whatever, compared to, let's just say 10, 20, 30 years ago. So I think there's more opportunities. I think there's more outlets. I think there's more resources to make it happen as far as providing people with the comfort or the opportunity to share vulnerably. Where the challenge still resides is in certain environments and certain situations and certain people. Not every workplace is going to be the same. Not every, neighborhood is going to be the same. And so it really is circumstantial. Scott was alluding to some of the challenges that lie in the police department, in sort of that fear of, if I speak up for help, what if, what will happen? Will there be any consequences? And so I think that, it is a mixture of fear in some cases, but it really is circumstantial. The key to providing the opportunity for folks to share openly and be honest and be vulnerable in their thoughts and their feelings and their circumstances is creating a community. And that's the key. That's the bread and butter, whether that looks like your family, friends, officers, church group, online Zoom meetings, whatever it is. It's just to create a common space, a common platform for people to be themselves. And that's where the opportunity presents itself, is what I see.
Very nice. Now, Edson, you gave us a great answer before when we asked you why are men of color scared to cry. So, as a follow-up, why should men of color allow themselves to be more vulnerable? What are they going to gain by being more vulnerable and sharing more?
Good question, Mike. So I would say what men will gather more as far as opening up more and being more vulnerable, I think is more courage. Because from my perspective and from experiences from what I've dealt with and just doing research and, speaking with a lot of my fraternity brothers or close friends, that having the courage to do it really shows how strong of a person you are, because it's one of the toughest things to do. To be vulnerable is probably one of the most toughest things that you can ever do. So to be vulnerable and to allow people to let you know that you're struggling and you're dealing with different situations kind of gives people a perspective of who you are. And sometimes, I read an article of an individual, how he was, he got this job and he was one of the top performers, but he was never promoted. And he finally asked why. And then they told him that you're not personable enough, you're not building relationships, you're not vulnerable, we don't know who you are. So, in doing that, that can also hurt you as well. So I think being vulnerable and allowing people to see who you truly are, it allows you to also see who other people and who they truly are, because it gives you the perspective of people who you can trust, people who you can speak with, people who you can open up to. So in you being vulnerable, it allows other people to see who you are, but also gives you the opportunity to see who people really are for themselves. And I know when I struggle, and I know when I open up about some of my situations, a lot of fraternity brothers and a lot of my friends were like, Edson, like, why didn't you share that with me? Like, why didn't you say anything? Like, I'm surprised that you were feeling that way. And, so it kind of opened doors, you know, for me to be more vulnerable. And in me being vulnerable, it allowed them to be more vulnerable, not only with me, but with their wives, with their significant others, with their family members. So you being vulnerable can be a trickle effect to get other people to be vulnerable. So that's really that's vulnerability is so underestimated of how important of a leadership skill that it can be. You know, you have no idea how much you affect people and give them the courage to speak up, to be themselves, to own who they are. So as a Black man, I think if we own up and be more vulnerable and be more open and ask more questions and choose to talk more and say more, it will allow people to truly see who we are as individuals, but it also gives the opportunity to see who they are.
I love that answer. Now, we've talked about a couple of professions here. I mean, obviously, you're a student affairs professional. We have Scott here, who is a police officer. Edson, do you think there are particular types of work environments that are more likely to cause depression among men of color?
Great question, Mike. I would say yes. And I mean, there's no particular profession or ideal job or anything of that nature. I just think it depends on the environment and the experience that you're dealing with. So if you're in an environment where you're not being valued, where you're being undermined, where people are like saying, "Oh, Edson, I love you, you're a great person," but then talking bad about you behind their back, then it really deals with then you're put in a situation to where it's like, am I really valued? Do I really belong here? Should I stick it out? Should I leave? So you deal with all these different things. And with some individuals, I know myself, when things aren't going, the way it's supposed to be, I start to question my value and I wonder, what am I doing wrong? What can I do differently? What should I be doing differently? When a lot of times, it's not really you, it's the environment, it's the people, it's the job, it's umbrella, or it's whatever it is. So when it comes to when you're in those types of environments, I think it's really important to find those sources of help to where you can go to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is kind of what I'm going through, how can you help me to kind of get through this? And if you're not seeking the right help from those areas within your job or company that you're with, then that's a sign that they don't value you and it's time to go. And other environments that could be conducive to men of color is that, when you're in an area where, you're always around people of color, and then you're in a working environment where you're the only person of color. So you're like, will they get me? Will they understand me? Will they look at me differently? To the story I just mentioned about the individual who was very performing high at the job, but he kept his head down. He didn't want to develop relationships because he felt he'd be looked differently. So those are types of different environments that, sometimes we're put in that makes us uncomfortable. And, instead of trying to deal with it and really trying to own up to our vulnerability, trying to build relationships or trying to find ways of avenues of help or what are things that can work, we kind of hide our emotions and bottle it up. And then, sometimes we blow up. And then when we blow up, we're viewed as the angry Black man. Oh, don't say anything to Edson because he's an angry Black man and he's going to, want to start a fight or get mad again. So, those are types of working environments that are not conducive it's not conducive for anybody, so, men of color, white men, women, it doesn't really matter. When you're in an environment when you're not feeling valued and you're not being pushed to your limits in order to better yourself, those types of environments are just, it makes people feel like they're not worth it, that they don't belong. And then, it might cause people to do things that they shouldn't be doing, as far as self-harm or different things, or questioning their worth and everything of that nature. So to those individuals who are in environments that are not conducive and they don't feel valued and you don't see yourself really moving on, try to find individuals or try to seek help to where you can really express yourself, to where you can get to a point to where you can improve mental health wise and, spiritually and everything of that nature. And if you see that it's not going anywhere, that's just a sign that it's time to go and move on.
Hey, Scott, I was also curious about this because as a black man, as a police officer, do you feel supported by your white counterparts in the police department?
You're on mute again, Scott.
We got to unmute you.
There we go.
There
I
you
s- Absolutely. I work in a very diverse area of Tampa, and I personally have not had any issues from a coworker, and where I felt like I was being disrespected, or where my race was being used against me, or judged because of that. Are there racist people who work in law enforcement? I'm pretty sure there is. But with my agency, I personally haven't had any issues. I actually have multiple friends who we have very different beliefs, very different political beliefs, and it's all about mutual respect. We can have a discussion and talk, and we talk about life, we talk about politics, we talk about finances, and we end up respecting each other and having a good conversation, and we end up learning from each other. And that's something that the world, the communities, the world can absolutely learn from. And it's all about mutual respect.
Mhm. So, I mean, Dr. Moore is one of our audience members here. She's a mother of two black men. And what she's basically saying is that being vulnerable can also work against them in the professional environment. It might help, but vulnerability in the wrong place at the wrong time can damage you professionally. So what's your advice to Dr. Moore and her sons that are just concerned that being vulnerable and opening up could hurt them? What do you think?
Definitely, to me, everything in life has balance. I would say show vulnerability. Anytime you have an issue at home, you don't have to broadcast it in the office or in your work environment.
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay to be open. It's okay to be honest. It's okay to tell people how you feel to a certain extent, as long as you're keeping it professional and you're maintaining that professional presence in your workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be difficult learning balance, but it's one of those things where if you have good friends within the workplace, you throw it towards them first and get feedback and base it off of that. But it's definitely all about balance and respect towards your coworkers as well.
Yeah, I like that answer. Thank you so much for that follow-up. Greg, talk to us a little bit about common ways that men try to hide their true feelings.
Sure. I think it's, the first thing is just we're really good at identifying and trying to activate escape routes. And escape routes can look like too many hours of video games, or a lot of men overcompensate with humor. Trying to be funny to get past the feelings of whatever the reality is. It could be, just whatever it is to avoid the challenges of that they're going through. So, I think it just varies on how each man hides their feelings. But a lot of it stems to do with, identify. Each person has like a different way of kind of coping with challenges, and some do it in healthy ways and some do it in not so healthy ways. And I think most people sort of fall in a mixture of both, I have buddies that, try to hide their feelings by going to the gym for 4 hours and lifting in 4-hour sessions, literally. And, to them, that's like a good thing, but, it's debatable, right? So, it's just overcompensating in whatever that person feels is a mechanism to cope, to push the reality of the emotions, the rawness of the feelings aside. And we all have something. It's learning to adjust. It's learning to prioritize, and it's learning to just adapt on activating the healthy ones more so than the unhealthy ones, what I would say to that.
Mm-hmm. So, Greg, you've obviously talked about a lot of different ways that men try to hide their feelings. And so I guess I'm curious from your perspective, um, what are some signs of depression that we may see from other men, whether that be in a college community, whether that be other police officers, other student affairs professionals? What are those signs that we should be looking out for in terms of depression from other men?
It's a critical question, especially because depression is so common nowadays. But short answer, the number one thing you want to look for is an apparent change of behavior. It could be anything. Just, I mean, whoever that person is in your life, you know that person best. Maybe they're overcompensating or trying to be someone who they're not, or maybe it's isolation, or maybe it's avoiding certain conversations, not showing up to normal social events or gatherings or friend meetups that person would normally do, delaying in schoolwork or work tasks. But isolation, change of behavior, sort of a wave of emotions is another one, really highs and really lows, depending on the life events that play out. But those are sort of triggers or things to watch out for in the people in our lives, in the men in our lives who may be wrestling with feelings of depression or major depressive disorder and whatnot. So it's important to keep an eye out for changes of behavior. It really just varies and depends on each person, each situation, and every single circumstance.
That's really helpful for us to be looking out for. Edson, I want to ask you this question. Why are men of color scared to seek help from professionals when they need it?
Great question, Meg. But before I answer that, I wanted to also respond to Dr. Moore's response. And Dr. Moore definitely mentioned a good point that a vulnerability can also work against you at times and so on. And Scott, I think, answered the question very well. So I just wanted to add that, I've experienced that where it kind of went against me, but it also helped me to kind of understand who I was. And I grew from that experience as well. So I think it's definitely important to understand your resources, kind of who to go to, and, so that, you're not just airing out everything to everybody. So I think in understanding your resources and knowing who to go to, if you do need help or want to be vulnerable, anything of that nature, I think that's a big part of being vulnerable, learning of who are those, constant individuals or resources that you have for yourself. So as much as it can work against you, I think in that happening, it can also help you to grow from it and learn and to become stronger and better from it as well. So it has its peaks and valleys and that you go through when it comes to vulnerability and depression and mental health or anything of that nature. We just kind of have to sometimes do our best and just see what we can get out of it and make sure that we surround ourselves and run the people who are going to keep us up and sustain us so that we don't lose who we are. So I just wanted to respond to that. And Dr. Moore, thank you for that perspective as well. In regards to men of color seeking mental health when they really need it, one thing that I read about and did some research on, a big part of why men of color don't want to seek mental health is because there wasn't a percentage, but there was a good amount of men of color who stated that when they did seek help, they were misdiagnosed and they weren't given the proper treatment. So in our eyes, if we're going to be misdiagnosed, if you're going to give us, treatments that we don't really need, why are we going to go to you for help? You say, you kind of say, oh, you guys should go to ask for help more and seek help and seek help from a professional. But when we do, we're not given the proper medication or channels or the different things that we need. So why should we? If you're going to misdiagnose us, why should we go? So we kind of have that in the back of our minds in regards to why should we seek help from a professional? We're just going to get diagnosed. And I think we also have this mindset of, oh, we're fine, we're okay, we don't need help. And I think that comes with the upbringing of being strong and not showing weakness. So it all kind of comes into play with that. And I've also read some stories and research that, you know, a lot of men of color, you know, seek help within their faith. So instead of going to a professional for help, they'll go to the pastor, they'll go to a preacher, they'll go to the church because they feel more comfortable with their faith and going to someone who they've grown up with for a while instead of talking to someone who they've never met before.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some of the things that prevent us as men of color to seek professional help because one, we think we're fine and we don't need it. So it's that whole strong mentality. We don't want to be viewed as being weak. You know, that's one thing. Two, those that do seek help, a lot of them have stated that they have been misdiagnosed, you know, and they've been given wrong treatments and different things. So it's like, why go when you're just gonna give me the wrong information? And three, you know, we use our faith as a way to, you know, help us with our mental health because that's something we're accustomed and used to. And we feel like going to our church and our pastor and God is our way to kind of relieve our stress.
Got it. Now, Edson, I think you can help us out with this question here from Mel. Mel is a white woman. She's worked on campuses as a student administrator, working with Black men, students on her campus for many, many years. But she often felt limited because, number one, she's not a man. And, you know, number two, the students probably thought that she can't really relate to them. So I'm wondering from your perspective, you know, let's say that you're a student and you have a student administrator happens to be white female, right? How does this person reach college men of color that she's working with, number one? And number two, how does she educate or encourage the other chapter members, let's say in your case, maybe other men who are in Alpha Phi Alpha in the chapter, to become better support systems for their brothers when it comes to mental health?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so as college administrators, you know, in order to relate to students of color, you know, you just have to try and meet them halfway, and you just have to try to have those conversations. And sometimes you might have to sit them down and say, look, like, I'm really trying to understand how to help you, how to support you. I want you to understand, you know, as a white woman, white male, or anything, like, I want to support you. I want to be there for you, but I'm struggling to how to. So I'd like to have the conversation as far as how do we do that? What type of education do you think we should provide? You know, should we bring speakers? You know, should we bring, you know, something of the arts? You know, should we provide, you know, different groups or different open discussions? Like, what are different things that you think that we can do in order to support men of color? You know, what are different things you're going through? Get to know them on a personal level and try to see what are dislikes and what are some of the likes, you know? So, and I think when you notice different tendencies with them, you know, you're like, hey, like, when this happened, you kind of was a little off. Are you okay? You know, did that make you upset? How are you feeling? So I think when they see that you're taking the approach and you're actually taking initiative to want to learn who they are, you want to know who they be, and you're taking initiative to seek help, I think they're gonna be more open to say, wow, this person's actually taking the time to really understand and really help me, you know, let me start to open up a little bit. Let me try to tell her some of my needs or some of the things that I want, or you know, that will help me. So I just think when it comes to, you know, working with, you know, trying to understand, you know, men of color, is just really trying to relate to them, understand them, speak with them, having conversations. And as Dr. Moore just said, you know, with in building authenticity, that's a great point. You know, we can see right through people if they really want to get to know us and really support us, or if they don't. So if we see that you're not being yourself and being authentic, then we're not going to open up to you.
Got it.
So it's very important to build that authenticity with students, You know, I mean, all students across the board, but with men of color, if you see that you're being authentic and you're being supportive and you're really trying to bring resources to help them, to support them, they'll be more obliged and more open to be there for you and want to help you and want to support and want to meet you halfway because they see that you genuinely care and that you genuinely want to help them. And while you guys are saying some great things in the chat that's giving me ammo, but what Spencer Gibson just said, show up to the events. You know, if they have a program, if they have an event, if there's something going on, just show up.
Right.
You know, or be like, hey, you know, I see you have this program coming up. Can I, you know, serve as a judge, you know, or do you need any help with it? Do you need any assistance? Again, if they see that you're trying, they will eventually, you know, learn to open up to you and learn to really like, oh, this person's really here to help me, you know, be a better person and really to support me. Like she doesn't care that I'm a man of color. She just sees me as a man that just wants to be better and wants to help me.
Yeah. These are great points. Our audience has all the answers. This is fantastic.
They do. Really Thank you, Spencer and Dr. Moore.
Yes, that's fantastic. Now, Scott, you know, I love having a police officer on our panelists because it's so relevant to what's going on currently. And so I'm wondering from your perspective, moving forward, how can police officers and citizens in our communities all across the country collaborate in a way that leads to more unity, more trust, rather than what we currently see, which is sometimes fear or backlash that has clearly an impact in terms of the mental health of our officers. So how can we work together instead of all of this fear and backlash?
It's a great question. And it's something, there's no magical cure or answer to building bridges within the community. But the first thing that we have to do is invest in these communities. And by investing, I just don't mean money. You know, oftentimes just throwing money at problems never works. By investing, we have to invest in money, yes, but education, infrastructure, and time and care, because, you know, building up these communities to where people who are less fortunate or people who don't necessarily trust the police officers, if they see us there for things other than arresting people who look like them or people who don't look like them, but if they see us for more than just arresting people, you can build rapport, you can build bonds, you can build authenticity with people, and you can go to a person if you have a crime that you need to get solved. You can go to a person and hope that you know, that they can actually talk to you and see that, you know, you actually care about this community and you're out there to do your job and to help people out, protect and serve. And, you know, another important thing is holding our own accountable, you know, and just as important as it is for law enforcement to hold their own accountable, you know, citizens have to hold theirs accountable as well. And, you know, when something goes on, be willing to talk about it. If you see something, say something, because, you know, if there's no dialect, there's no bridge between that community and nobody's holding their own accountable, then all you have is the wild, wild west. So it's a multifaceted issue and not something that I anticipate can be solved with one thing. But I think by following that, you can definitely bridge the gap and make, you know, community-oriented policing something that is legit and that can help move us forward.
You know, as a follow-up question to you, Scott, Spencer, one of our audience members, he was talking about earlier, he said these days men and boys of color are seen as problems first and people second. So I'm wondering from your perspective, since you're law enforcement and a man of color, how do we change that stigma?
Well, I would say one of the biggest things is recruiting more diversity. I think a lot of agencies are moving towards that, and it helps, you know, if you're somebody from a neighborhood, you know, from a rough neighborhood, and all you see is, you know, the police. Sometimes it helps to see a face that looks like yours, you know. So that's one thing. I know myself, when I go into even if it's a rougher community, I see these boys, men, young men. I see them as just, you know, they're either kids or they're men, they're people. You know, and I could be something there unrelated, but you strike up of a small conversation, talk, see how everything's going, and sometimes they'll engage in it, and that's how you know, everybody treating each other like human beings. That's all you can do, and that's all we can really do. But you know, not looking at a person as a threat until they become a threat.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for the feedback. That's really valuable, I think, for everybody who's listening here. So Greg, earlier you talked about some of the signs of depression that you may see from men. So Greg, what are some resources we can give everybody in our audience to help men cope with depression? Let's assume that we see the warning signs. Now what? What resources do we give them?
Sure thing. I'll provide 3 different recommendations. So the first one is, the very first step, you want to identify, is it a time of crisis, or is it sort of a ongoing resource that can be utilized to help that person who's trying to deal with it and cope with the depression. So if it is a time of crisis, you probably want to look towards either the crisis text line or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline if somebody's life is potentially on the line. As far as 2 ongoing resources, I'd point to in 2 directions if you're a man in this country who's dealing with depression. So the first one is the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. They're the largest peer-run support group in the country, and they have, usually it's in person, right? But we're all in this digital world currently. So virtual support groups, and it's all peer-to-peer. So it's not like top level down where you have like a leader, just like you have a boss in a workplace. It's all peer-based community members and people and friends who link up and often struggle with depression, anxiety, bipolar, and just mood disorders. So that one is for men and women, but certainly for a man with depression, it is a resource. The other one is actually strictly for men with depression. It's called the Face It Foundation, and it's very similar to how it's constructed, just like DBSA, but for men who live with depression, support groups, online, in person when it's normal times, a lot of different things, community events, educational programming, just all kinds of different like resources and just ways to plug in if you are a man with depression who's trying to sort of build a community, build a base, and have some commonality with people. That nobody wants to feel alone, and you're certainly not alone in any of your thoughts, your feelings, or your circumstances, no matter who you are. And that includes if you're struggling with depression. So, certainly if, therapy, psychologists, psychiatrists, if that is a route that is necessary, absolutely go that route. But if you're looking for just resources to plug into, every now and then, maybe once a week or so, I would point you to DBSA or the Face It Foundation.
That's perfect. I really appreciate that.
One last thing I'd add, Ed was talking about, church communities. That is another place as well. Faith-based organizations, churches, to build that community as well.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. You mentioned the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Of course, that phone number is 1-800-273-8255. They are available 24 hours a day. Languages, English, Spanish. So just want to put that out there. And then Edson, you have a few resources that you wanted to share with our audience too.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually sharing it in the chat right now. So just different resources that I found, some different websites in regards to building communities or, for African-American women and males. So I posted in the chat, Beam that community. That's a community where they try to bring communities together in order to talk about mental health. And then therapy for Black girls. That's more of a space, for Black women to, if they want to, seek therapy or different things. And then there's another website that I posted called Therapy for Black Men, resources to where you can find, different areas to seek help in regards to finding therapy or seeking help or getting advice or anything of that nature. And to add what Greg said, though, churches, I remember church was big for me growing up. So going to my pastor and going to church often was a good release for me, being a part of the youth group and different things. So definitely utilize your churches as well.
Okay. That's great advice. Hey, Scott, while we still have you, Dr. Moore was talking about the fact that the black males that she has spoken to about pursuing a law enforcement career, for these black men, they say it brings them unnecessary stress. They say that it brings them a state of delusion and depression just to think about this as a possible future career. So what do you say to black men that are considering a career in law enforcement?
It's difficult. I, you know, I'm not gonna even lie and say that it's an easy profession, and that, that it's just something that it's not easy. She's correct. But with that said, how better to change the system to be on the inside looking out? I can't tell you how Officer A is going to treat Citizen B, but I can tell you how I'll treat them. Um, you know, there's no better way than to change something to be on the inside, and to recruit other people, and to educate people. I talk to a lot of friends that say, they get tired of educating people on, what it's like to be black. And almost the same thing can be said for different aspects of law enforcement, because looking outside in, you think one thing, but being on the inside, you learn a lot of stuff, and you get to know a lot of things, and you see things from a different perspective. But I would definitely encourage, nothing that's worth it was easy. So it's definitely a fulfilling. It's fulfilling, especially when that you've changed somebody's life, or you've saved a person's life, or you've done something that will change the course of a family's life. So I encourage anybody who's interested in doing it to do it. I mean, public service. We don't do it for the money. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. Spencer was wondering, how do you decompress at the end of a challenging shift? Let's say you have a really bad day at work. I mean, what methods do you use to decompress and be who you want to be for your family?
Well, I'll give a two-part answer to that.
All right.
A regular stressful, shift. Um, it's great to maybe go for a walk, or do some yard work, or being outside helps, getting some sunlight, some vitamin D. Exercising, going to the gym is a great way of just releasing stress, and getting, those thoughts, organized and cycled throughout your head. And I've been to some calls where, they were rough, and it wasn't just, you see, a person, die, or you see a violent car accident, and it's not going to take one day or 24 hours to get it out of your head. I remember there's a call in particular where, I had to do some life-saving efforts on a kid, and unfortunately it didn't work. And, I was broken up for it for a while. I think I even talked to Edson and Spencer about it, where, you start to doubt yourself, could I have done more? Or is there something I did wrong? And even though you did everything you could have done, it's taxing on you. So just having a good relationship with your family, and being able to talk to your wife or your mother or your kids, that helps a lot too. And just being honest with your feelings. I remember that night I came home and cried in my wife's arms, and having that relationship where she could, help, get those emotions out, and tell me everything was going to be all right, helped immensely. So.
Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for what you do in protecting all of us. We owe you a huge debt for what you do every single day. And I love the support system that you've built, clearly, with your fraternity brothers and other men in your life, because I think that's really the answer. It's building that community of people that you can lean on when you need it. And it seems like you've done that. So I think that's why you've been so successful. So I'm really happy for you. And this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much to all of our panelists here, Greg, Scott, Edson. You're all absolutely amazing. Anything that you want to say as we conclude our session here today?
Thank you for having me. It was great being here, and definitely learned a lot. And it was a very interesting forum, being able to hear from all involved.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
I'd second that. I just want to thank everyone on this call. just really appreciate your guys' perspective, you guys pouring in your questions, your input, and yeah, just coming together to build a sense of unity in a chaotic time. Really appreciate you, Ed and Mike, and for setting this up. And Scott, we thank you for your service and pray for your safety for sure.
Absolutely. Edson,
Yeah,
any closing thoughts from you, Edson?
Yeah, just when I spoke with Mike about this, Mike was always on board, and then I spoke with Greg, and Greg was always on board as well. And inviting my LB Scott, I'm very appreciative of you and what you've done. You've had my back since 2004, so I love you like a brother, man. So appreciate everyone who's took the time to be on the call tonight. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for the amazing questions and which created even more of an amazing dialogue for us to talk about. So this was tremendous. Thank you all. And, this isn't the end of the conversation. This conversation will continue, but, hopefully this will be the beginning of something that, that's very important, especially to, men of color. And, and then eventually we want to get to the point where we're supporting not only men of color, but all men, all women, all races. It'll take a while. It won't happen overnight, but hopefully one day we'll get there. So
very good. Well, thank you so much. This has been so helpful, and we will definitely put this out on video. If you want to share this with other men of color, please feel free to do that. Please like it and share it. We'll put it out on social media on the Greek University YouTube account, which is youtube.com/Greek University Inc. It will be up there a little bit later on today. And thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. We're sure to bring you some additional great conversations in the weeks to come. So thank you so much. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful night.
good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.